Hi, and welcome to the Law Center videocast. I am your host and founder of the Law Center, Larry DeMarco. Thank you for joining us this evening. We go live on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., so please join us in the chat room on the right side of your screen and we can interact live. Today, we are here with Randy Flood. Randy is credentialed as a limited license psychologist and holds a master's degree in counseling psychology. He's provided specialized evaluations and counseling services for men since 1992. In 2000, he's joined the Fountain Hill Center and co-founded the Men's Resource Center of West Michigan, where he currently serves as director and is the principal therapist in providing individual counseling and group psychotherapy for men for issues such as anger, domestic abuse, and sex addiction. And we're going to hear all about him. Randy, thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
Thanks for having me, Larry. It's good to be with you.
Randy, I found you somewhat serendipitously looking for an article about domestic violence in my research for parental alienation. And then I came to one of your articles where you wrote about both issues. So I was reached out. So after we communicated, I learned that you wrote several other great articles about parental alienation and high conflict divorce, and also a couple of books. So Randy, how did you get your feet in both of these two professional domains, which are often in conflict with each other, which is the reason why I was looking for articles in the first place. I'm more in parental alienation right now.
Right. Well, there's a professional story to it, but I continue to specialize and work with men's issues. I was in an internship that was a forensic practice, and I was exposed to forensic psychology early in my career. I wasn't planning on going into forensic psychology. I thought I was going to do private practice and disengage in regular types of counseling. But I was really exposed to forensic psychology in the criminal court as well as the family court. And in the criminal court, this practice specialized in working with domestic violence offenders, sex offenders, drunk driving offenses and such. And they also had contracts with the family court, and they provided custody and parenting time evaluations and parenting fitness evaluations. And so I was introduced early in my career into both of those domains. And I discovered, Larry, that I really liked it. I really liked the forensic psychological practice. I liked the intellectual stimulation. I liked the scientific process of developing multiple hypotheses and letting data test what is going on. I loved the social justice aspect of it and holding perpetrators accountable for poor behavior that impacts others and families. So I became very attracted to it, and I ended up keeping both feet in those domains throughout my professional career. And so what was interesting is that I had to involve myself in professional conferences and memberships. And what I ended up experiencing is that in my role as, for example, the president of the Batterer Intervention Services Coalition of Michigan, which specializes in training people who provide batterer intervention for court-ordered clients committing domestic violence, I was immersed in that field. And then I also was immersed in like the Association of Family Conciliation Courts. And so I was going to these professional conferences, and I would hear them badmouth each other. In that one side was talking about how parental alienation professionals would use parental alienation as a defense so that they would not hold batterers accountable. And so they saw those professionals as working against them, like providing a batterer with arsenal to defend and obfuscate and not hold themselves accountable. And then I would go into the AFCC conferences and sometimes hear people talk about, well, these domestic violence advocates, they don't understand that there's sometimes high conflict divorce, and they're both responsible for contributing to the escalation of conflict. And they don't understand that sometimes there's parental alienation and children are rejecting a good enough dad or mom rather than, it being an example of estrangement or abuse. So there lies the origin of my experience of working in both domains, and they weren't talking to each other very well and figuring out how to create an umbrella above both of them that helps them understand that both exist, and we need to do a better job at assessment to make sure that we're designing protocols, interventions, counseling services to address what really is happening, rather than getting into this zealous advocacy for one camp or the other.
I want to ask you about that later on in the show, but right now, can you tell us some of the work that you do with families in family court and divorce?
Sure. Like I said, I provide evaluations for the family court. Often they come in and they're court ordered and negotiated through a stipulated order or through some litigation process. And so it can be a full custody and parenting time evaluation. It can be a parenting fitness evaluation. And then more recently, or historically, we would have ruling in, ruling out domestic violence, ruling in, ruling out parental alienation. And now we have this new nomenclature, which we call resist and refuse dynamics in parent-child contact problems. And that's the larger umbrella. And then the judge is asking me, Mr. Flood, you develop multiple hypotheses. Is it estrangement, abuse, neglect, and the child's rejecting a poor parent with poor parenting fitness, and the preferred parent is a protective gatekeeper? Or is it an alienation dynamic where you have a obstructive gatekeeper parent who's alienating and the child's rejecting a good parent? And so I provide evaluations for what we call resist and refuse, and then render an opinion. I also do parenting coordination. Are you familiar with that? Or co-parenting counseling? Okay. And then I also do parent-child reunification counseling, and then just generalized court-ordered counseling for a mom or dad or children or families. So that's the gist of my services. And more recently, or in the last 10 years, I've been doing more expert consulting, expert testimony, or coaching or consulting with litigants or an attorney who's involved in a litigious process and wants to use me as an expert.
So why are you passionate about this type of work? I know you love it because you write great articles, you wrote great books. What drew you to this?
Well, like I said, the internship, I never planned on going into this, but once I got into it, what I enjoyed about it was the intellectual process of doing an evaluation and developing these protocols where you had to get data from multiple domains. You get data from the clinical assessment interviews with the parties involved, the children, the families, the parents themselves, and then you have psychological testing, and I enjoy the psychometrics and analyzing testing. And then you have collateral information, which is now some of the largest part of our evaluations, because people bring in multiple documents, multiple social media and texting and emailing and pictures and audio tapes for us to review. And so you take data from all three of those domains, do an analysis, and then render an opinion from that. I enjoy that process. And then I also enjoy holding people accountable and protecting victims. And I do that when I work in the domestic violence field, and I'm privileged to do that when I'm working in a family situation where there's parental alienation going on. Both, there's an offending type of energy, and then people are victimized in both types of dynamics in a family.
You wrote an article about this tension. So 3 great articles, by the way. You sent me 3. They were all real helpful. Let's talk about that first one first, where you discuss what you'd like to see or how you'd like this conflict resolved, or get into the details of that article, if you would, for us.
Yeah, and certainly feel free to bring to the discussion things that you remember reading as well, that and we could do a deeper dive into it. But I don't think these ideas or these disciplines or these dynamics that are going on in families are in conflict with each other. I do think that each domain or each issue uses the other as a defense, as a way to obfuscate or hold or not hold themselves accountable as to what's going on. And so as a result, these disciplines or these professionals have become like enemies or like arguing their ideology against each other. And I don't see it as that. I see family violence or resist and refuse dynamics as a larger umbrella. And I see domestic violence, as we understand it, the abuse of power and control to hurt a spouse or to terrorize children, as a form of violence and an offense that's unsafe for children and unfit for adults. And I feel the same way with parental alienation. It's a form of psychological abuse. It's a form of erasing a good parent from a child's life or from children's lives. It's a form of brainwashing or toxic attachment patterns that are where there's enmeshment and adultification and parentification. All the things we know from long historical understandings of family dynamics and attachment processes that we know is dysfunctional and toxic, that is inherent in parental alienation. So we need to root these dynamics out in families, expose them, and address them. I don't see them as in competition with each other intellectually. It's just you got to be able to find out what is going on. And that's why I enjoy the forensic process of evaluating it.
I agree with you. So what do you believe the solution is? More studies, having professionals trained more thoroughly? How do you see this tension where the two professionals on each side are bickering, and where do you feel it needs to go to be resolved?
Yeah, I think that more training, and again, I kind of stumbled into being trained in both domains, fortunately. And I think that I like advocacy, and I think we have organizations to provide advocacy for domestic violence victims. For example, we have shelters, we have the battered women's movement that was integral in the 70s and 80s and 90s. The Duluth project that was integral in that whole process. And I really think advocacy is a way to create energy and organize professionals to get on board and train the community, train the courts on the importance of understanding domestic violence dynamics, for example. And so, unfortunately, our professional pathways, we get into these cow paths, we get into following these organizations and reading certain books and commiserating with professionals who also specialize and advocate, and then we don't understand the logic and the issues that might be in another domain or another situation. So I think we need to do a better job training professionals that work with families in the family court, so they have the kind of training that is a form of cross training. So if you are working with families, you want to make sure that you're working with evaluators and counselors who've been trained both in domestic violence and in parental alienation, rather than just someone who's trained in one or the other.
Your second article is How to Survive Parental Alienation. Can you give some pointers on someone who is facing it right now and is being denied access to their child because of false allegations?
Yeah. Parental alienation is a dynamic that professionals will call counterintuitive. What they mean by counterintuitive is that most of our training, especially in the mental health field, is based on children rejecting parents for legitimate reasons. You think about child protection and how we didn't understand child abuse and neglect and domestic violence years and decades ago. And we've done a really good job finally having child protective services, investigating abuse and neglect. We're doing a better job looking at sexual abuse, doing a better job providing accountability for domestic violence offenders. And so most professionals, most judges are trained in understanding what now is intuitive, because that's what becomes intuitive. It starts out as being an intellectual understanding. You work in the field for a long period of time. You see numerous cases, read numerous books, and then all of a sudden your clinical judgment is intuitive. With parental alienation, everything you've learned about what children say and how much you listen to them and how much credibility you give to one parent setting the table and providing context to understand why a child is refusing and rejecting a parent, all of that has to be challenged or thrown out the window because it doesn't apply intuitively in alienation cases. And so I talk to parents about how they're struggling in a riptide almost. And if you understand riptides, that they teach you, if you're caught in a riptide, to not swim directly into the shore because it's such a powerful force. It'll take you out to sea and you'll lose energy and lose the ability to be able to stay afloat, and you'll eventually drown. What do they teach you? To swim parallel with the shore and to get away from the riptide, and then once you're out of it, then to go in towards shore. So the alienated parent is out in sea, sees his children at shore, and wants to get to them. And they stubbornly try to swim towards shore, and they lose energy, and it doesn't work. And what does that mean? That means they go into a therapist's office who are working with the children, and they're angry, and they're disgruntled for good reason. But they come in and they end up playing into the cards of the alienating parent and saying the children doesn't want to be with this parent because they're cranky, irritable. They produce conflict. They're intimidating, and so they go in and they start playing into that role. And so what I teach alienated parents is how to work smartly and strategically in trying to develop a plan to systematically address the alienation with the professionals.
I want to point out to both you and the viewers that counterintuitive nature of parental alienation, I turned into a video. It was written by Dr. Stephen Miller, and it's called Why Are Experts So Confident About Their Incorrect Conclusions? That's on my parental alienation playlist. And then, of course, I want to remind the viewers that your article was turned into a video on that same playlist. And gosh, the title has parental alienation and domestic violence in it.
Yeah.
And so if they type in the Law Center and Randy Flood, it should come right back up. So Randy, if I could also ask you about that third article, which leads in right into your explanation now. What mistakes are they making? You know, this is counterintuitive. So, you know, a lot of parents swim into the against the current rather than swimming sideways. So what are the five? Well, you know what? Why don't, instead of giving the five, I don't know that we have enough time. Give me a top two mistakes that you see in your practice that parents are making.
Well, one of them is that they begin to see the children as kind of the enemy, as the, you know, I have these children that I've devoted my life to. We have this really good base rate relationship, and that's lingo in parental alienation, if you understand that, where I have a pre-existing relationship with them, and I've devoted my life to them. And then all of a sudden these kids are hating me, telling lies about me, and they start seeing the children as somehow bad actors, as though they're just they're rebellious, they're all the morals and values I taught them, they're forgetting. And so they go into like a lecture mode. So the parenting time is all about trying to lecture the children and hold them accountable for telling lies and doing all this terrible stuff that's causing the family to break down. And I try to help parents understand, or rejected and alienated parents understand, that the children are just merely manifesting the alienation dynamic, and look at it as though it's like an emotional cancer that's growing inside them. And if you don't address the alienation, it will metastasize and eventually take over the child's whole mental health and emotional health and erase you out of their life. And so I help them see that children aren't lying; they're actually confabulating. They're telling stories and telling things to make something real, which is this narrative, this false narrative that they're trying to uphold, and they're trying to uphold a loyalty contract with the alienating parent. So having more empathy for the child is what I'm trying to teach them.
Very
So
good.
that's one mistake. And the other mistake is when they will sometimes bring in extended family members because the child's not listening to them. And so then they'll get grandpa and uncles and aunts and cousins to try to also talk the child into understanding that all that the things that they're saying are lies and your dad or mom are okay and safe. And again, the child ends up withdrawing more and more from that tribe they now see as hostile and who don't like them. And so enlisting the help of your extended family to then go on the offense and attack the child is not going to help either. And so those are two common mistakes I see in helping them understand. I know why you're trying to do that, but it's not going to work.
So I want to point out to the viewers that to read these articles, the links are in the description portion of the video, as well as how to get the next, the two books that you co-authored. Can you tell us briefly a little bit about each, and if for people who are looking for resources, what they'd find if they read both books? First,
Yeah.
the first one, Breaking the Cycle of Abusive Behavior, and the other is Mascopathy, Understanding and Healing the Malaise of American Manhood.
Yeah, mascupathy. It was a mouthful.
Mascupathy, thank you.
Yeah. The British version is mascupathy. Anyway, yeah, so this gets into my experience and expertise in domestic violence and working with them in the Men's Resource Center. We specialize in offering psychological services to men, and one of those programs that we've run for years and working in the field of battery intervention is domestic violence programming and anger management. And so we've run groups for men for, I've run them personally since 1992. And then in 2000, I opened the center and I have staff who run those groups for me. And I do just general men's psychotherapy groups now. But in our work with men, there wasn't a book written, a self-help book for men who are trying to understand why is it that I hurt the woman I love? Because that's the title, Stop Hurting the Woman You Love. And so we wrote the book because it wasn't out there. There was a lot of books written generally about domestic violence and the impact it has on women and all that, but there wasn't one written specifically for men. So that book is a self-help book for men. And if a person who's listening is wanting to get help and maybe doesn't want to jump into counseling right away, can pick up a book like that and begin the journey of developing accountability, insight, and empathy for their partner. And the second book came from the desire to write a more general book about men. And there's a lot of, again, fighting and argumentation about what to call the problem. Betty Friedan wrote in The Feminine Mystique about the problem with no name, which was kind of what we would term a toxic form of femininity, saying women are just supposed to enjoy being housemakers, staying home, not interested in education and getting a career. And why were these women living in the suburbs and picket fences having the great American dream and depressed? And it was because the female socialization told them this is the only thing you can do as a woman, and they were stuck in a rigid gender bind.
And that's the definition of the toxic femininity, being behind the picket fence and not outside into the community?
It's a form of constriction, a form of limiting women's humanity. It doesn't mean that a person who decides to be a stay-at-home mom has a toxic femininity. That's not at all. It's just when you constrict a person's humanity and limit their choices. And the same thing happens with men, and that's what we call the mascupathy, the malaise of American manhood, is that men historically have been stuck in a patriarchal way of looking at their masculinity, and that men are supposed to be tough, strong, in control, not have any emotion, and be able to go out into the world and create, provide for their family and such. And all of that's wonderful and good, But again, if you're forcing men in that narrow definition of masculinity, a lot of men get lost in not being able to develop a fuller part of their humanity, a better emotional intelligence, better relational intelligence, and to be able to have the ability to have flexibility to respond to the social context. And if it requires competition, then I have the skills of being aggressive and competitive. If it requires empathy and passion and compassion, then I have the human skills to be empathic and compassionate. So we want to change the way in which we raise boys so they can be raised into developing a fuller humanity and a healthier, more wholehearted masculinity.
And of course, both genders have taken enormous leaps and strides
Yeah.
away from that in modern times. So you
Yes.
also have that podcast, Revealing Men. What issues do you cover on that?
Yes, Revealing Men is another creative project that I picked up a couple years ago, and it was just this idea because there's so many podcasts that are available, and so many people learn from that type of format. They're not the type of person who's going to read a book, and so they want to be on the move, want to be going, and listen to some education, listen to some good conversation, and maybe even be entertained as well. And so Revealing Men is pulling back the curtain and revealing the inner lives of men. And so I bring in guests and I interview people, and we have critical conversations about issues that affect men. And we try to give people an understanding of what the inner landscape of what is going on in men's life that sometimes seem inexplicable. And kind of like, why do guys do that? Or why do guys think that way? Or why do guys prefer this? Or why do guys resist that? We try to give people an idea of some of the emotional struggles that men might experience, and pull back that curtain and expose the little old man working the levers of the powerful Oz. And so that's the intent of the programming, is to have those conversations, and it's entertaining and informative.
So you have a guest who gives maybe a profile of an individual for each episode?
Yeah, we pick a subject matter, like sexuality, or we pick anger, or pornography, or men's relationship with environmentalism and caring for Mother Earth, or just a variety of things like that, and try to do a deep dive into it and help people have a deeper understanding of what's going on in men's lives.
Well, I look forward to listening, and I encourage our viewers also to try it out. The link is in the description portion of the video. So tell us about the two organizations you work for, the Fountain Hill Center and the Men's Resource Center, and what resources you provide in each one.
Okay. Well, the Fountain Hill Center is the larger organization. That's a nonprofit in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The center is in um, an old historic district with this house that's built in the 1800s. So it's really cool. You're not walking into like a clinic type atmosphere in a hospital or a strip mall or whatnot. And we have 15, 16 therapists who do all kinds of different kinds of counseling that you would see, from marriage counseling to people who work with children with ADHD to a variety of things. We have a family court team that does strictly family court counseling, and we specialize in working with judges and attorneys on that. And then on the second floor is the Men's Resource Center, where I work in with my staff, and we have specialized mental health services specifically for men. And historically, it was all in person, and then the pandemic, of course, ushered in this new era where we're doing a lot of online teletherapy services for men, and doing Zoom groups and doing individual counseling and via Zoom, and it gives us access to more men. So we're working with men all over the globe that are English speaking, because we don't speak in multiple languages, unfortunately. And then we also have men around the United States who are participating in some of our sex addiction groups and domestic violence groups, and stuff like that. And so the Fountain Hill Center has a variety of counselors. with a specific family court counseling team that works with families doing evaluations, parent coordination, parent-child reunification. And then the Men's Resource Center is a separate center within Fountain Hill that specializes in the men's services, counseling services.
Going a little off script here, Randy, you are a counselor who did face-to-face, and then you switched to Zoom. Do you feel you almost get as much when you still can see someone's facial expressions, you can hear their tone of voice, and you can interact? The only really thing you can't do is shake hands and hug. Do you get enough on that video conferencing to be able to be effective?
Yes, I think it's different. We still do in-person counseling. I would say that in-person counseling is superior. Ultimately, everything you can get on Zoom, you can get in person and more. But I do think it's going to be on the menu. It's going to be an option for people, and we work with what we call an engagement model. And for some people, it's less threatening to anticipate signing up for teletherapy and being able to have the convenience of not having to travel all the way across town and in rush hour traffic and trying to mark time off my calendar for travel time back and forth, or I'm limited to the counselors that I can drive to, and I might be in a rural area and they don't offer specialty counseling for what I struggle with. So I think teletherapy is here to stay, and I think people engage, and a lot of good work is done. I've had some incredible sessions in teletherapy, and it also helps us provide evaluations to families and consultations to families in the family court arena that I couldn't have that opportunity prior to the Zoom and the teletherapy option. So I'm doing testifying in court, for example, in courts in Michigan, without having to charge the person who hires me 4 or 5 hours of travel time, totaling 10 hours. And all they got to do is click on, and there I am. I show up and testify, and they click me off and charge me only for my time on Zoom.
No,
so that's
I
good.
get it. You use the word teletherapy, but after the pandemic, we've had Zoom, which to me is video therapy. And for me, with my clients, Randy, I would have to say there is an enormous difference between video therapy, where I can look at the expressions, I can look into your eyes and see your facial expressions, versus tele, meaning just sound. So
that's what I meant, Larry, is that they're calling it teletherapy, which again, our language is just always behind, the way in which we evolve as human beings. So I think that, yes, it's a misnomer, and we need to come up with better language. I often just say Zoom video therapy or whatever, but the insurance industry, for example, which drives a lot of our nomenclature, they're still calling it teletherapy.
Thank you for saying the insurance, because I wanted to ask you about your license, and you're here in Michigan, but you also, now we have Zoom. Now, suppose one of my viewers are in California or where I am in Pennsylvania. Is there any service that they could take advantage of that you offer, or are you limited to a state license?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that, again, we're kind of in new uncharted territory, and I think that the pathways as humans that we create, it takes ethics and laws to kind of codify and kind of catch up with things. But as I understand it, currently there will be getting the ability to get licensed in other states, and they're going to make that more expeditious and a little easier to do because of this new landscape. But as it stands now, if you are not allowed to do psychotherapy or psychoanalytic therapy or some type of traditional mental health therapy unless you're licensed in that state that person resides in. Okay, so that's kind of how it goes. Now, if you are seeking coaching, or something's like a court ordered evaluation, and then they say that you're not going to use insurance and different things like that, or I'm just consulting as a psychologist and offering expert opinion, then you can start crossing state lines in different ways to do that. We have online educational groups for domestic violence and anger management that's more psychoeducation and not psychotherapy. So we could provide some educational kind of group processing groups that are not traditionally mental health type, and they're not using insurance, they're not getting a diagnosis. And so there is some creativity in those areas, but it is kind of uncharted and somewhat nebulous and difficult sometimes to traverse.
So then I do want to point out one difference, unfortunately, because of time limitations, we can't get into more, but it's the difference then that you can accept insurance from someone within Michigan. For viewers who are watching in Michigan, if they want to take advantage of one of your services, would they potentially, as long as the insurance offered it, be covered? Is it an insurable service that you offer within Michigan? But again, someone outside wouldn't have this ability to take advantage of that.
Yes, if someone's from Michigan, there's no limitations that they would have to seek services from us, from the array of services, from psychotherapy, diagnosable mental health conditions, where they're going to be using their insurance in some capacity. As Michigan residents, you can sit at the table and partake in all of what we offer. Where if you're not a Michigan resident, then there's some limitations. We can engage with you, but it's got to be well defined as non-mental health type counseling where insurance is being used. Yeah.
So Randy, please, before we go, tell us, and some of this is going to be in the description portion of the video, but how can we learn more about you and find you?
Yes, you can. Two websites that you can access me at is the menscenter.org, www.menscenter.org, and in that website is all of the description of the specialized services we offer for men and the programs that we offer for men. And then there's family court and criminal court pages on there where you can access services that I provide, consultations, evaluations, expert testimony, and those kinds of things. There's also blogs and podcasts on that website. So you can access Revealing Men podcasts. You can do that through Spotify, Apple, and all that as well. But there's some great articles free that you can read. Podcasts are free. So there's a lot of good information that you can gather on that website. And then we have the books for sale and some of our online counseling and consultation that you can access there too. And then the Fountain Hill Center is fountainhillcenter.org. I'm pretty sure it's .org or .com. It's slipping my mind right now. But then you go there and you can see all the different therapists that work within our center and the services that are offered there.
Randy, let's leave it there. We're out of time, but I want to thank you for being a guest on the Law Center videocast.
Thanks for having me, Larry. It's good to have a conversation with you.
We've been here with Randy Flood, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, share this video link, and subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you can get alerted of when our new videos go live. Tune in every Tuesday night at 7, where you can watch with us and other viewers in the chat room on the right side of the screen. And don't forget to check the description portion of this video, where you can learn more about Randy Flood and the Law Center. Again, thanks for watching. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.